But we begin tonight with what else? The largest leak of wartime documents in this country since the Vietnam War. More than 90,000 U.S. government documents obtained and posted by the website WikiLeaks over the weekend. The last time classified information of this volume regarding an ongoing war was published, it precipitated a full-on war between the New York Times and the Nixon White House. It was, of course, the leaking of the Pentagon Papers during the Vietnam War by a U.S. military analyst named Daniel Ellsberg back in 1971. The Pentagon Papers episode was one of the touchstones in the history of the war that helped turn the public against Vietnam War. The 90,000-plus documents posted by WikiLeaks this weekend are different from the Pentagon Papers insofar as they're a set of discrete and granular snapshots of the war over the last 6 years, as opposed to a top-down study of the war initiated in Washington. The WikiLeaks documents are raw intelligence, incident reports, threat analyses, as seen through the eyes of the soldier fighting the war, as opposed to an analytical view of the war from policymakers. So in that sense, WikiLeaks is no Pentagon Papers. But there is a glaring parallel between the two that can't be ignored. These WikiLeaks documents have been notable in that they essentially confirm all of the major points of criticism of the Afghanistan war effort. That elements of the Pakistani government are to varying degrees in cahoots with the Taliban. That the local Afghan government is loathed and corrupt. That our efforts at smiting the Taliban often lead to horrific instances of civilian casualties. And the money spent on nation building often ends up lining the pockets of warlords and profiteers. Those have really been the main critiques of this war effort. And they're all essentially substantiated in these new documents. Now, the significance of the Pentagon Papers was that they demonstrated that within the U.S. government, there was an analysis of the Vietnam War's failings that precisely echoed exactly what the war's critics were saying on the outside. And they were leaked at a time when the White House was attempting to ostracize and marginalize the war's critics as just a bunch of flag-burning hippies. They helped transform the anti-war protesters' critique into something with a tremendous amount of gravitas. These WikiLeaks documents threaten to do the same thing with the Afghanistan war. They essentially validate and mainstream the concerns of the war's staunchest critics.
It's clear that it will shape an understanding of what the past 6 years of war has been like, and that the course of the war needs to change, the manner in which it needs to change.
Joining us now from London is Declan Walsh. He's the Guardian newspaper's foreign correspondent for Pakistan and Afghanistan. He was among the reporters who was given access to these documents before they were released to the public. Declan, thanks so much for joining us tonight. I know it's late in London, so I really appreciate it.
No problem. My pleasure.
I guess the first question, since you did have kind of a jump start on looking through these documents, what surprised you most? What kind of jumped out at you as you were reviewing them prior to today?
I suppose the most striking thing was the profusion of reports that reference Pakistan's intelligence service, the Inter-Services Intelligence. There are about 180 reports within this dossier which carry a range of allegations saying basically that Pakistan has been manipulating the insurgency, has been supplying them with weapons, with suicide bombers, with money over the last over the 6-year period between 2004 and 2009. And this really, it's very difficult to stand up a lot of the allegations that are made in these reports, which are, of course, ground-level intelligence reports, but they do raise a lot of questions about what the role of Pakistan is in this war. How this is going to play out between America and Pakistan remains to be seen. I think, this has been a very rocky relationship for several years now. I think both sides, to some degree, have learned to live with their differences, because the truth of the matter is that the US and Pakistan have different objectives in Afghanistan, and those differing objectives do sometimes clash.
I wonder how you would respond. There's a certain group of people in the U.S. particularly who seem to be saying essentially there's nothing new contained in these documents. This is essentially old news, but that it confirms a set of critiques that have already existed. It is very similar to the contours of many of the arguments that are made about what's wrong with the U.S. involvement in Afghanistan. Do you think that's a fairly accurate picture, or do you think that misses it?
I think broadly speaking that's probably a fair picture. I mean, there are a number of important elements that have come out of this. There's the ISI element. There have been files that, for instance, have shown that the Taliban have had a greater capacity to shoot down Western aircraft using surface-to-air missiles than was previously thought. So that's something we didn't know. But for me, really, one of the most valuable things in this exercise is the very unvarnished, gritty, on-the-ground picture of the fighting that you get. In many of these reports, you very much get the sense of the soldiers on the ground grappling with very difficult situations, which often have very tragic outcomes, unfortunately. I mean, there are a lot of reports in here about civilian casualties, something that we tend to know about in terms of statistics, because these things often happen in remote areas where there's no reporting. And the sort of dispatches that you see here from the soldiers actually bring it to life and tell you about the small tragedies, that make the chaos of the war in Afghanistan, and that also have a very significant impact on Afghan perceptions of this war and why they think it's going wrong.
Declan Walsh, foreign correspondent for The Guardian newspaper, thank you so much for your time tonight.
My pleasure.